Picture this. You're standing in a Roman marketplace in the year 300 AD. In your hand, you hold what's supposed to be a silver denarius, the backbone of the Roman economy for over 500 years. But when you bite down on it, your teeth hit copper. The silver coating flakes off, revealing the worthless metal underneath. The merchant you're trying to pay laughs bitterly. "That coin?" he says. "It's worth nothing. I need a wheelbarrow full of those just to buy a loaf of bread." You look around the marketplace, and you see the same scene playing out everywhere. Citizens clutching bags full of worthless coins, merchants refusing to accept them. The entire economic system of the greatest empire in human history collapsing. This isn't just ancient history, this is a warning. Because the exact same thing that destroyed Rome is happening in America right now. The Roman Empire didn't fall to barbarian invasions. It didn't collapse because of political corruption. It died because of something much more insidious. Something that took 250 years to completely destroy the foundation of Roman civilization. They destroyed their money. And we're doing the exact same thing. Hey, I'm Brandon, and welcome back to My Money Mint, the channel where I dive into topics related to money and wealth. All right, let's get into it. Let me take you back to 211 BC. The Roman Republic is locked in a life or death struggle with Hannibal and the Carthaginians. The Romans are desperate. They need to fund their armies, pay their soldiers, and keep their economy running. So they create something revolutionary: the silver denarius. This wasn't just a coin, it was a promise crystallized in metal. Each denarius contained 4.5 grams of nearly pure silver, 95 to 98% silver content. When a Roman soldier received his pay, when a merchant made a trade, when a citizen saved for the future, they knew exactly what they were getting. Real, tangible, valuable. Silver. For nearly 300 years, this system worked perfectly. The denarius became the backbone of Mediterranean commerce. It funded Rome's expansion from a small Italian city-state to master of the known world. It created the economic foundation that supported Roman roads, aqueducts, armies, and civilization itself. But here's what's crucial to understand. The strength of the denarius wasn't just in the silver, it was in the trust. Citizens across the empire trusted Roman money because they knew it contained real value. They knew that when they accepted a denarius, they were getting 4.5 grams of precious metal. This trust allowed Rome to build the greatest empire in human history. Fast forward to 64 AD. Emperor Nero is facing a crisis. The Great Fire of Rome has destroyed 2/3 of the city. Wars are draining the treasury, and Nero needs money, lots of money, to rebuild and fund his military campaigns. Now, Nero had a choice. He could raise taxes, cut spending, or find other ways to generate revenue. But there was another option, a seemingly brilliant shortcut that would give him instant access to more money. He could cheat. In 64 AD, Nero made a decision that would echo through history. He ordered the mints to reduce the silver content of the denarius from 98% to 90%. This meant that for every million denarii the government collected in taxes, they could mint 1.2 million new denarii. It was like magic, instant money creation. But here's the thing about magic. It's always an illusion. Nero wasn't creating wealth, he was stealing it. Every new debased coin transferred purchasing power from Roman citizens to the imperial treasury. The scary part? It worked, at least initially. Roman citizens accepted the new coins because they looked the same, felt the same, and carried the same imperial stamp. The debasement was subtle enough that most people couldn't detect the difference. But the money changers knew. The merchants who handled thousands of coins every day, they could tell. And slowly, quietly, trust in Roman money began to erode. Here's the insidious thing about currency debasement. Once you start, it becomes impossible to stop because the benefits are immediate and obvious, while the costs are delayed and hidden. Every emperor after Nero faced the same temptation. Military campaigns needed funding, public works required money, bureaucrats demanded their salaries, and there was always that easy solution. Just reduce the silver content a little bit more. Let me show you how this played out. Under Trajan in 117 AD, silver content dropped to 85%. Under Marcus Aurelius, it fell to 75%. By the time of Septimius Severus, the denarius was only 50% silver, half of what it had been under Augustus. But the emperors weren't just stealing silver, they were stealing time. Each debasement was essentially a tax on the future, borrowing purchasing power from tomorrow to pay for today's expenses. And like all debt, eventually it comes due. By 250 AD, the Roman Empire was in full crisis mode. Barbarian invasions, civil wars, economic collapse, political chaos. The crisis of the 3rd century had begun, and it would nearly destroy Rome completely. During this 50-year period, 24 different emperors ruled, and 84% of them died violent deaths. But here's what the history books don't tell you. This political chaos wasn't the cause of Rome's problems, it was the result. The real cause was monetary collapse. By 300 AD, the silver denarius contained less than 2% silver. 2%. It had become a copper coin with a thin silver coating that wore off almost immediately. Citizens were literally carrying around fake money. Think about that. In 250 years, Rome had gone from a currency that was 98% silver to one that was 98% base metal. The foundation of their entire economy had been quietly, systematically destroyed. The final stage was pathetic. Roman mints were producing what amounted to counterfeit money, copper coins with silver plating so thin it rubbed off in your hands. It was official government fraud, and everyone knew it. When money becomes worthless, everything else falls apart. Let me give you some numbers that will blow your mind. At the height of the Roman Empire, a sextarius of wine, about 2 cups, cost 1/8 of a denarius. By 301 AD, after Diocletian's price controls, the same wine cost 8 debased denarii. That's 6,300% inflation. But it gets worse. By the end of the empire, 1 gold solidus coin, which had replaced the worthless denarius, could buy millions of the old silver denarii. The currency that had built the greatest empire in history had become literally worthless. Emperor Diocletian tried to stop the bleeding with price controls. The Edict on Maximum Prices, which fixed the cost of over 1,000 goods and services. Violators faced death. It was a complete disaster. You can't control prices by decree when the money itself is worthless. It's like trying to stop a flood with a screen door. The Roman military, once the most feared fighting force in the world, began to collapse. Soldiers couldn't be paid with worthless coins, so they turned to looting and pillaging to survive. The very armies that were supposed to protect the empire became its greatest threat. Trade broke down, cities emptied, the complex economic networks that had held the empire together unraveled. Rome was transforming from a monetary economy back to primitive barter. Now, let me bring this story forward 1,700 years to August 15th, 1971. President Richard Nixon appears on television, and with a few words, he destroys the foundation of the global monetary system. I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Just like Nero's temporary debasement, this temporary suspension has lasted over 50 years. In that moment, Nixon did to the dollar what Roman emperors did to the denarius. He severed the link between money and anything real. He turned the world's reserve currency into pure fiat, backed by nothing but government promises. The parallels are terrifying. Since 1971, the dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. What cost $1 in 1971 costs almost $8 today. That's not gradual inflation. That's a systematic debasement. But here's where it gets really scary. America is now spending more on interest payments on our national debt than we spend on national defense. In 2024, we paid $881 billion in interest compared to $874 billion on the military. Rome faced the exact same crisis. Soaring debt payments meant there wasn't enough money left for actual military readiness, leaving the empire vulnerable to barbarian invasions. But America's debasement is happening much faster than Rome's and on a much larger scale. In 2020 alone, the United States created $3.4 trillion in new money. That's 20% of all dollars in existence it created in a single year. To put this in perspective, the total M2 money supply has exploded from $4.6 trillion in 2000 to over $21 trillion today. We've created more dollars in the past 20 years than in the previous 200 years combined. Rome's emperors would be jealous. They had to physically melt down silver coins and add copper. We just type numbers into a computer, but the economic laws haven't changed. When you create money out of thin air, you're not creating wealth, you're destroying it. You're stealing purchasing power from everyone who holds that currency and transferring it to whoever gets the new money first. Here's where America's situation becomes truly terrifying. We've crossed what historian Niall Ferguson calls Ferguson's Law. Any great power that spends more on debt servicing than on defense risks ceasing to be a great power. America has crossed that line. Our national debt is over $37 trillion. That's roughly $250,000 per household. The Congressional Budget Office estimates it will reach $52 trillion by 2035. But here's the real killer. As interest rates rise, the cost of servicing this debt explodes. We're now in a debt-death spiral, where we have to borrow money just to pay the interest on money we've already borrowed. It's exactly what happened to Rome. Military expenses and debt payments consumed so much of the budget that there was nothing left for actual governance, infrastructure, or economic growth. Now, you might think I'm being dramatic, that comparing America to Rome is hyperbole. But let me show you what currency collapse looks like in the modern world. Germany in the 1920s. At the peak of Weimar hyperinflation, prices were doubling every 3.7 days. A wheelbarrow full of cash couldn't buy a loaf of bread. The German mark became literally worthless paper. Zimbabwe in the 2000s. By 2008, Zimbabwe's inflation rate hit 79 billion% per month. A $100 trillion bill couldn't buy a single loaf of bread. The currency was abandoned, and foreign currencies took over. Venezuela today. Inflation exceeded 1 million% from 2013 to 2018. Citizens are fleeing the country with whatever assets they can carry as their life savings evaporate. These aren't ancient history. These are modern economies that followed the exact same path as Rome. Currency debasement, loss of confidence, hyperinflation, economic collapse. Here's the terrifying thing about currency debasement: it becomes addictive. Each round of money creation provides temporary relief, but creates bigger problems that require even more money creation. It's like a drug addiction. The doses have to keep getting bigger to achieve the same effect, until the patient dies. Rome started with Nero's modest 10% debasement, but by the end, they were producing coins that were 98% copper. America started with Nixon's temporary suspension of gold convertibility, but now we're creating trillions of dollars per year. The pattern is always the same. First, governments debase temporarily to solve a crisis. Then, inflation begins to erode purchasing power. Next, public confidence starts to collapse. Then, more debasement is needed to fund basic operations. Finally, economic activity collapses and the currency is abandoned. We're currently somewhere between steps 3 and 4. But here's what's really insidious about currency debasement. It's not random. It doesn't affect everyone equally. It's a massive wealth transfer machine, moving purchasing power from the poor and middle class to the wealthy and well-connected. In Rome, wealthy citizens could protect themselves by owning land, gold, and real assets, but ordinary Romans, who saved in denarii, watched their life savings evaporate. Today, it's the same story. Asset holders, people who own stocks, real estate, commodities, benefit from inflation. Their assets rise in nominal terms even as the currency loses value. But working-class Americans, retirees on fixed incomes, people with savings accounts, they get crushed. Their wages and savings lose purchasing power every single day. It's the ultimate regressive tax, hitting the poorest the hardest, while enriching those who least need help. Rome's monetary collapse didn't just destroy the economy, it destroyed the government itself. During the crisis of the 3rd century, the empire nearly fell apart completely. Why? Because when money becomes worthless, You can't fund armies, you can't pay bureaucrats, you can't maintain infrastructure. The political chaos of that period, the endless civil wars, the assassinations, the collapse of central authority, these weren't causes of the crisis. They were symptoms. The real disease was monetary collapse. America is showing the same symptoms: political polarization, institutional distrust, social unrest. These aren't separate problems. They're all connected to the slow-motion destruction of our currency. When people lose faith in money, they lose faith in everything else. But here's what makes America's situation uniquely dangerous. Rome was just one empire among many. When Roman money collapsed, the rest of the world kept functioning. But the dollar is the global reserve currency. It's the foundation of international trade, the basis for most commodities pricing, the backbone of the world financial system. When the dollar collapses, and it will collapse if we continue this path, it won't just destroy America, it will take down the entire global economy. We're not just playing with our own future, we're playing with the future of human civilization itself. So, is there hope? Can this death spiral be stopped? History shows us that it is possible, but only with dramatic action. Constantine the Great, after witnessing the complete collapse of Roman silver currency, introduced the gold solidus in 312 AD. This pure gold coin restored confidence and provided monetary stability for another 1,000 years in the Byzantine Empire. The lesson? Returning to sound money can restore confidence, but only if accompanied by broader reforms. For America, this would mean constitutional limits on deficit spending, a return to asset-backed currency or strict monetary rules, massive cuts in government spending, elimination of the Federal Reserve's ability to create money out of thin air, and, most importantly, the political will to endure short-term pain for long-term stability. But let's be honest, the chances of our government voluntarily giving up the power to create money out of thin air? Pretty much zero. So what can you do to protect yourself and your family? First, understand that this is a wealth transfer and position yourself on the right side of it. Own real assets, things that hold value when currencies collapse: gold, silver, Bitcoin, real estate, productive businesses, skills that retain value. Second, diversify across currencies and jurisdictions. Don't keep all your wealth in dollars or in America. History shows that when currencies collapse, capital controls and wealth confiscation often follow. Third, get educated, learn from history, understand the warning signs. The people who survive currency collapses are those who see them coming and prepare accordingly. Rome's denarius took 250 years to completely collapse, from Nero's first debasement to the final worthless copper coins. But modern fiat currencies, with no physical constraints, can fail much faster. Digital money can be created instantly, in unlimited quantities, with no need to actually mine silver or melt down coins. The velocity of collapse is accelerating. Germany's hyperinflation took only a few years. Zimbabwe's took about a decade. Venezuela's is happening in real time. The dollar's collapse, when it comes, could happen within months or even weeks. Modern financial systems are interconnected and digital, meaning that loss of confidence can spread at the speed of light. But here's something important to remember. Monetary collapses don't mean the end of civilization. They're often followed by periods of renewal and growth. After Rome's monetary collapse, new kingdoms emerged with sound money systems. After Germany's hyperinflation, they rebuilt with a stable currency. After every major monetary crisis, societies eventually return to sound money principles. The question isn't whether this will happen, but when, and whether we'll be prepared for it. America stands at the same crossroads that Rome faced, the same crossroads that every great power has faced when their currency became disconnected from reality. We can continue down the path of monetary debasement, creating trillions of dollars out of thin air, pretending that we can print our way to prosperity, until the whole system collapses in hyperinflation and chaos. Or we can learn from history, return to sound money principles, endure the short-term pain of fiscal responsibility, and build a foundation for long-term prosperity. The choice is ours, but not for much longer. The Roman Empire didn't fall to barbarian invasions. It wasn't destroyed by political corruption or military weakness. It died because they destroyed their money. And when money dies, everything else follows. The process took 250 years, from the first temporary debasement under Nero to the final collapse of the silver denarius. But each step seemed reasonable at the time. Each emperor thought he was just solving a temporary crisis. America has been on the same path for over 50 years. Since Nixon closed the gold window in 1971, we've been systematically destroying the purchasing power of the dollar, creating money out of thin air, and accumulating debt that can never be repaid. The parallels aren't coincidental. They reflect universal economic laws. When governments have the power to create money without limit, they will abuse that power. When currencies lose their connection to reality, they eventually collapse. History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And right now, America is composing the same verse that destroyed Rome, that devastated Germany, that collapsed Zimbabwe, that's destroying Venezuela. The only question is, will we learn from history, or will we be doomed to repeat it? The answer may determine the fate of not just America, but the entire world. Thank you for watching my Money Minute.